Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's episode of A New Thing. Excited to be here with all of you. And I just want to say that right off the bat, I was ahead of the Vatican years ago when I brought an anime character on here. Check this out. I just want to point this out because this has been sweeping the internet. The Vatican unveiled their new anime mascot, and I had one years ago. So I just want to say that I was ahead of the trend. um, so good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. We're going to be talking about a little bit about this, but not really. I think this is mostly funny. We're going to be talking about the movie Conclave today, which I got to see. I'm sure you've seen um, uh, trailers for that, maybe in different places. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm excited to do that with all of you. First things first, though, is before I continue talking about anime characters of the Vatican, I want to read this passage for us because this is going to be the one that kind of sets the tone for what we're going to talk about. So this is Matthew 23, 1 through 12. This is during Jesus's uh, time when he's entered Jerusalem and he's making his way to the Mount of Olives after cleansing the temple. And during this time, he's actually this is a big part of Matthew. I preached on parts of this pretty recently. This is when Jesus is attacking the Jewish religious establishment, and you're going to see that here. So this is what he says. He says, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, 'The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and their tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted.'" So, Jesus here is attacking the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. He actually says something interesting at the beginning, right? He says, "Do what they do, but not do what they tell you to do, but not what they, don't do what they do." So basically, what he's saying is, listen to the law and the prophets, what they quote right from the Old Testament, but don't actually do anything that they add on or the way that they act, because that's all rubbish, right? So he's attacking there. Um, Interestingly enough, and this episode isn't really meant to be an attack on the Catholic Church or anything like that, but this is one of the verses that I've seen people cite when it comes to attacking or kind of critiquing the Catholic Church, because, and generally kind of the high church elements, because there's a lot of added things in these traditions that are supposedly important, right? And this is one of the uh, parts of Scripture that a lot of Protestants will appeal to and say, "Look, you guys are just doing exactly the same thing that the Pharisees did." But I'm not gonna be talking about that today. That's actually not why I chose this passage. I actually chose this passage for verses 11 and 12, where Jesus says, "The greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." So all this, we're going back to here, right? So in case you haven't heard about this, this is an article from Sky News by Dylan Donnelly. It says, "Vatican unveils new cartoon mascot for Catholic Church." It says Archbishop Reno Fisichella says the mascot, named Luce, is, quote, "created from the desire to enter into the world of pop culture so beloved by our young people." And you can see Luce there. I actually thought this photo was Photoshopped the first time I saw it, because the anime character Luce looks like he's out of place here, but that's real. He had like a little towel over him, and he took it off. And lots of people online, I'm sure, as you can imagine, are having a lot of fun with this right now. Um, And it says the Vatican unveiled a new mascot for the Catholic Church in the hope of engaging young people, a cartoon character named Luce. Archbishop Rino Ficciello, the Vatican's chief organizer for the church's upcoming Jubilee year, said the mascot was created from the desire to enter into the world of pop culture so beloved by our young people. Now, I'm not an expert. Is in that I'm not. I don't like. I'm pretty sure with a Jubilee, like I'm not completely aware of all the things the Catholic Church is doing. I'm pretty sure the Jubilee is actually an event that is held specifically for young people. So it's like kind of at a city around the world, and young Catholics from around the world will go there. Usually, the Pope will speak, or other important people will speak. And so I think he's dressed like a pilgrim. So he has a little staff. He has these dirty boots, and he's wearing like a parka, a rain jacket, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's like why. Yeah. Actually, right here it says Archbishop described Luce's design as typical elements of the pilgrim, pointing to her shining. I thought it was a boy. Pointing to her shining eyes and symbol of the hope of her heart. I mean, that's not what I would point to. I would just point to the fact that she's dressed like a pilgrim. She has friends. You can see here. So they're all like, can I get a better image of this? You can see how they're all in different pilgrim gear. And their names are Fei, Xin, and Sky. I think that's a Chinese way to pronounce things. And so, interesting. In the least, right? And a lot of people are... I like this. The image represents a happy union between Christian symbols and Japanese culture. I mean, honestly, like, people are making fun of them for this, but I think, like, it's been effective is what it's supposed to do. Like, I think, one, young people, even if they kind of find it funny, I think this is going to be one of those, like, you kind of get attached to it because it's so ridiculous. Like, again, the World Series ended yesterday. I'm a Mets fan, right? We didn't get in there, but, like, the Mets are, like, known this season for having a bunch of ridiculous type of stuff that seems weird at first, but ends up kind of catching on because it's so ridiculous. So I could see this being kind of popular and things like that. Maybe they'll get a great merchandising deal out of it. Who knows? So anyway, Luce here, she's their mascot for the Jubilee, and you can see they have a bunch of things. Like, this is another famous one with him, like, sticking his hand out. Again, that looks fake to me, but it's real. And so they're all, people are all jumping on the Vatican for this. I actually don't think it's a big deal. I just think it's funny. I asked, in case anyone's interested, I asked both our young adults and our youth group if anyone wanted to make an anime mascot for our church, and no one stepped up to the plate. So I'm pretty disappointed about that. So if you're a parent, to shame your children, really. Now, all right, so Conclave. Conclave, all that, I just thought that was funny because we're going to be talking about the Catholic Church. It's like how important, how funny. So we're looking at Conclave. It's a movie that came out. It's based on a book. So first I'm going to give my thoughts generally on the movie and try to get a little bit of it in there, but I will then have like a spoiler warning and go into kind of more detail in order to give fuller thoughts, because it's kind of hard to talk about everything here, especially with the big twist and things like that, because it's a thriller, without giving spoilers. So in short, I think Conclave is good. The first I heard about it was months ago. I'm a big fan of Ralph Fiennes, and that's actually how you say his name. He's part of the casting crew here. He played Voldemort in Harry Potter. He's been in lots of other things. It looks like Ralph. It's not. A lot of people say Ralph. It's not. I don't know why. It's a British thing. It's Ralph Fiennes, and Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow. So pretty stacked cast, and it's a good drama, good thriller. Fairly these days with huge times, like 2 hours, to me went by pretty quick, and it's PG. Um, it's rare that you see a movie that's made for adults that actually kind of feels like it's real, because they're not just like blood and cursing and all that other type of stuff all the time. Because even though that is part of real life, I'm not saying it's not. That's not like 90% of our lived experience all the time. Um, and so I think it's just important to see that in a movie sometimes. And they're acting as though they are actually, uh, people, cardinals in the Catholic Church, which is good. I would say that these ratings pretty much reflect what I think this movie is. Overwhelmingly positive, both from, in case this is Rotten Tomatoes, in case you've never seen Rotten Tomatoes, the 93% is for critics, and the 84% is for general audience. And so, like, those are just user reviews that people make on the site, and these are actually critics from newspapers, and you can go down here and you can see the critic and audience reviews. So I think this actively reflects the worth of this movie. I think it's pretty good. Now, the first thing I really saw about this, the first reactions I saw about this, actually were very negative reactions coming from the more conservative side of the spectrum in the United States. In fact, the first video review I saw was actually a few weeks before the movie came out, because Conclave is based on a book, and that reviewer was very upset about the book and about the movie, even though I don't think he had seen it yet. But basically just saying that this is an attack on the Catholic Church, it's an attack on traditional values, da 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 da. I don't think that's what happens in this movie. The movie, in short, is as a, not as a synopsis, but as a plug, is about a pope dying, and a conclave is held to elect the next pope, and the different wings of the church are there. So you have your very traditional guy, you have your kind of broad appeal, you have the liberal, you have all of these guys. And I just will say, like, to some of their credit of the people who have attacked this movie for being progressive or liberal or whatever, is that it definitely tips its hand towards, well, not definitely, it definitely tips its hand towards the liberal direction of the Catholic Church, right? Saying, like, this is good, these are the good guys, this, this other guy's the bad guy. But I will say it actually holds back from going full bore, in my opinion, because I was waiting for that. Like, it's Hollywood, right? I'm not unaware that that's the general skew, right? Anyone who doesn't admit that would be lying to themselves, right? Hollywood is generally very progressive, very liberal, but I think it's very fair in the sense of basically everyone has their issues and their falls in this movie. It's not like the progressive wing of the church is perfect, and the like traditionalist or conservative wing is just the evil bad guys. In fact, there's actually a pretty touching moment with one of the conservative characters, bishops or cardinals, I should say, in the movie. And so I don't think that it's entirely over that. But the idea here is that people want it, right? The idea is, like, everyone is in the movie is trying on the surface to act like this, right? The greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted, right? So all the main kind of contenders for the throne of Saint Peter, right? They're all in this movie saying, "Oh, I don't really want this. If God chooses me, then that's fine." And there's some truth to that in some of the, like, it's not entirely, they're not all lying or cynical, which I'm glad, right? That's one of the things about Hollywood that I can't stand, is they either portray religious people as nuts or as cynical power grab people, right? And there are lots of movies that I can think of off the top of that, or shows or things like that. And so I'm glad that this movie doesn't do that. There's a little bit of that for one of the characters, but most of them, like, care about the Catholic Church and think that their vision is the correct one. And it's not just about power. But they do have this whole, like, there is this running theme of, one of the characters, Stanley Tucci's character, says, who among us, hasn't already picked out the name that he would want to be known by as a pope? Because I don't know if you don't know this, popes choose their names when they're elected. So they would say, "Oh, their name might be George or whatever," but when they become pope, they'll change. They'll take the name of John Paul, right? So it would be John Paul III, if it was something like that, right? So all of them, kind of have done that. And it's a good political thriller if you like that type of stuff, because the main character, played by Ray Fiennes, is trying to figure out, to make sure that it's a good and fair election, and he comes across lots of under the table stuff, and all of it is kind of pointing to this idea of, how should a pope be or act like what's the main focus. And I will say I have not read the book, which this is based on. Uh, there do seem to be some minor changes from the movie to the book, especially with the main character. But I think that makes sense. And just based off my Wikipedia reading, which who knows how accurate that is. But yeah, I think this movie is worth seeing. I think it's a good movie. We might watch it actually for one of our faith and film nights one of these summers, because it is good enough to watch again, in my opinion. And it already made more money than that massive flop by Coppola, the Megalopolis movie. So I don't think it's going to break even. I just think that it's not a subject matter that enough people are interested in to break through, to break even. But I hope it does. I hope it's good enough. I wish Hollywood would make more of these types of movies. It'd be better for us as a society, I think, if we got a little bit more thoughtful things. But even so, I think that the general thrust of the movie, this idea of humility, of trying to serve God, trying to serve Christ as best as possible, is important, and one that resonates with us, especially when we put in the context here: the greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. Anyone in ministry should have this, tattooed on them, myself included, right? Because so many of the pitfalls that the Pharisees have, we open up ourselves to. Not just in these traditions that place a lot of emphasis on bishops and oh, this guy in particular is really important, but even among us, right? I mean, a lot of people insist on titles, but you see Jesus here really, says that that's not always a good practice because of what this can do to the person who gets that title, right? And one of the quotes that I really like from this movie is they're trying to decide who they're going to have to be a contender against this one other candidate. Kind of the most traditional. He wants to bring the Catholic Church back to the Latin Mass, and one of the people says, as they're trying to figure out, they say, all of us, we are not ideal men, but we serve an ideal, and all of us have a black spot, because they're finding out that pretty much all the cardinals, something bad has happened, or they're not perfect or whatever. And so I like that. All right, so I think it's good. I think you should go see it. If you don't like it, you can get mad at me and talk to me about it. All right. Now I'm going to move into spoilers. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few seconds to click off. All right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the reason that this movie has become divisive, especially amongst religious circles, and especially why someone would say, oh, this movie's an attack on the Catholic Church, is they'll probably point to how some of the conservative bishops are talked about in this movie, but most of the focus is on the twist at the end. So the whole movie right there, and I assume this is true in the book as well, based on what I've seen, is that the different guys at different points in the movie come out on top. You need I think you need a 75 votes or something, 70 votes in order to be pope, and there are guys who get close, but then something bad happens. So there are various things with that, but eventually they settle on one candidate who's kind of like this surprise candidate, almost as though he's been, I don't want to say planted, but he's been kind of chosen by the Pope before him. And it's a cardinal from Mexico who is the cardinal of Kabul, I believe it is. So like, and what the Catholic Church has lots of these. There are bishops of places that they actually don't have any churches in. It's kind of a way of, giving someone a place, but not really giving them any control over something. Or if you want them to be a bishop or a cardinal, but all the seats are taken, you can kind of create a seat as a pope and give it to them. And so that's what happens. He's made the bishop of Kabul, which is in Afghanistan. So of course there's no Catholics in Afghanistan. And he's Mexican originally, and he kind of worked in a bunch of war-torn places around the world, helping people. And the last pope is the one who made him a cardinal. And he kind of shows up, and no one knows who he is. He's this mysterious contender. Anyway, over the course of the movie, he gains more and more traction, and eventually, after kind of an impassioned speech, which is a little ham-fisted, not gonna lie, but fine, he ends up being elected pope. And the big reveal at the end of the movie is, during the whole movie, you keep hearing about how he has some medical issue. And they're like, all right, what is it? Well, it doesn't seem to be anything serious, but we don't know what it is, da-da-da-da-da. And it gets to the end, and it turns out that he was born intersex. For those of you who don't know, that means that he was born with both male and female parts of a reproductive system. In the book and in the movie, it seems like it's clear that he has all the outside parts of a man, and that's how he functions. But after he went in for a surgery, doctors found out that he also had ovary and a womb in his body. And this does happen. This is actually a real thing. Very, 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 very rare. And just like in the movie and in real life, most people who have this condition are completely unaware of it, and are raised by whatever external genitalia they have. But obviously, this is kind of this is a twist, because in the Catholic Church, only men can be priests, only men can be bishops, only men can be the Pope. And so you have someone who kind of skirts the line of what's acceptable here. And in the book, from what I've read, is that and this isn't really communicated in the movie, but it's the main character, the cardinal, who's the main character. He basically knows that this is going to be discovered when this pope dies, and they do a medical examination. But he trusts God to, deal with that when the time comes. And of course, right, that's the thing that a lot of people are latching onto, because that's a big item. This book was written in 2016. So actually, if you bring it back to 2016, that's very kind of a new thing to enter the mainstream in the book, right? It's just starting our conversations about gender and transgenderism and stuff is just kind of starting to take off in 2016 at a public level. Now, of course, it's a really big ticket item and things like that. And obviously, like, I've taught classes on this type of stuff. You guys know that I have a biblical view of gender and things like that. I actually, in my case, like, if this happened to me, or like if I was in this position, granted, I'm a Protestant, and I'm not as attached to some of the things that the Catholic Church thinks are important, like an all-male priesthood and things like that. I still think, like, logically, I'd be like, well, you can't be both, and he's presenting himself as male. He's lived as a male his whole life. His body functions in that way. So despite this condition, it's clear that he's a man. To me, it's not as big of a twist or as big of a deal as it might be for some other people. That's kind of the big twist. And so that's what sets off a lot of people against this movie, and why you might see some negative reviews. I'm not going to, obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion or whatever. But the whole point is that character, the one who has the big twist, he's the one who makes the appeal that Jesus does here, that you're supposed to not desire the throne of St. Peter, that you want to be humble, that you don't want to be the one in charge, and that you have to serve everyone else. And of course, you can see why people might uh, be reacting against that sort of thing. But I think most people, 84%, 93% of critics, um, even if you take the critics out of it because you want to say, oh, they're kind of biased towards one direction, which I'm not going to disagree with you there. I don't think 84% of the people on Rotten Tomatoes are biased in one way or another. I think this movie is genuinely good. I think it raises interesting questions about that sort of thing. And I definitely think it's worth checking out. So if you have a chance to see it, it's there. It'll hopefully be a good way to challenge yourself to think more along the lines that Jesus is getting us to. And yeah, what a week for the Catholic Church. Big movie comes out about them, and then you have a anime character released. It's just one big thing after another. Their news cycle is great right now, right? What is that what's his face? That Irish writer said. Oh man, picture of Dorian Gray. I think can't remember what his name is. Oliver Wilde, Oscar Wilde, Oscar Wilde. What did he say? He said something like, "The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about." I think that's him. So, as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, hey, there you go. You're being talked about. All right, that's what I have for you guys this week. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. I'll see you on Sunday for worship. And if anyone wants to make an anime character and send it in, I am taking submissions. Have a wonderful day. Peace out.